Okay, so we just started the meeting and it's a little early, so some more people are probably going to sign in. But the basic idea is that I wanted to have a chance to go through some different potential projects that we have associated with a current project that I'm doing. And as usual, my main goal is to kind of take some research project that's funded that I've either gotten through UCLA or some outside source, and then try to carve out spaces where students of any age can kind of participate. So as you can see, there's me and Lizette here. I'm not sure whether or not we are going to be having other people join us, but I'm just going to kind of push ahead and start talking about what we came to do, kind of give you some background on the project itself, and hopefully kind of explain the funding in a way that makes sense. And here we go. So I am going to share my screen. All right. And so we're going to start off with just some real basics about, let me see. Sorry. It tends to block stuff, that little window that drops down. All right, there we go. So this is the Lit Search tutorial, and I'd like to start with the, oh, hi Lisa, how are you?
Good, you?
I'm good, thanks. So we have Lizette on, and I think some people are going to be kind of popping in and out. I'm just going to record the whole presentation, and then at any time if you want to go back and look at it or you have questions, but also feel free to interrupt. So what we do in Theory Generator Playground is we have these smaller projects that we work on, and the most simple way to get published and kind of the easiest little foray in research is to do a lit search. And when you do a lit review based on this lit search, you can get it published or you can create a poster, and it's ideally something that is a question, you then get some information, you synthesize it, and then the next person who comes after you can kind of stand on all the work that you did and take it forward. So that's kind of where we are. So this project in particular, so that everybody knows, this was actually funded by the president and CEO of the United Cerebral Palsy Foundation, and this is for LA, Ventura, and Santa Barbara counties. So it does have some minimal funding. They haven't necessarily established what it is yet. But basically, they're concerned about there being a lack of funding for caregivers who are living in the home. There is a 2017 policy paper that exists, and they sent it to me. The data's a little old. Hi, Nicole.
Hello.
Hey. I'm going to just keep trucking. So this is being recorded, and you can definitely look at it later. We just started. I'm just kind of giving you guys some background on the project. Okay. Essentially, you have this group that cares about neurological disorders like cerebral palsy. They want to go talk to the legislator in California. They want to talk to some politicians. And because California has a lot of money right now, and because it's a worthy cause, they basically want to have something that they can take when they go talk to these people who create laws and who manage the dispersal of various fundings that the state has at kind of carved out for regional centers and this sort of care. So basically the paper they have is good, but it's old. So what we can do to kind of help them get the money that they feel that they need for caregivers is that we can create a fact sheet, look at the data that was available on the 2017 paper, and see if we can get something more current. Because if something is published in 2017, it's likely that the data is probably from like 2014, something like that. And so if we were to get actual 2017 data, that would be much more current than what they have now. So we can create a fact sheet, and that is not exciting for me, but some people find that kind of exciting. It's a little bit of like a treasure hunt for data, and then you create a sheet, and And that's one piece of the puzzle. But the next piece is that they're going to be talking to politicians. And politicians are not very data wonky usually. They want to know the story behind what's happening. So we may also want to do a literature review that kind of paints a picture of what is life like for caregivers of people who have cerebral palsy or autism, other developmental disorders. What is their daily life like, and what are the burdens that they're facing? What are their challenges? How can we get them some money, and how can we support that they need money for this important cause? And it is due May 1st, so that's why we're meeting kind of quickly and just getting it going. Okay, so let's see. So now we're going to kind of settle into the background of how we do our initial approach on any of these projects. And again, I apologize. I know people are coming from a variety of different backgrounds. We have like some master's students, some high school students, some, a lot of different people who are going to be watching this and participating. But I just thought I would take a second to take a step back and say, how do we actually start this sort of an exploration? And that is all about developing a PICO question. The T is silent, and the T is kind of supposed to be silent because you don't always use the T. But basically, a PICO question is a question that is answerable. So if you use this consistent formula, then you're going to be asking questions that you can actually research. And in kind of the larger levels of research, when we're talking about big, huge studies, we sometimes have discussions about what's capital T truth and what's lowercase t truth. And capital T truths are things like, is there a God? Is it better for you to have a child or not, given your situation? Trying to think of some other kind of big T truths. But basically, the idea is that we don't have a good chance of even answering those questions. So it's best to not try to open the topic in a way that kind of shoots us in the foot from the beginning. So instead, there's little T truths, which are things that we can research and we can kind of figure out, such as, what is the time period in a person's life where if they've decided to have a child, they have the best long-term financial outcome for their family? Right? Like that is something that I can answer. It's not answering the big question. It's answering some kind of nuance in there about which we have data. So for PICO, the P is population or patient. And here it can be age or gender. For us, it's going to be individuals with cerebral palsy or some other neurological disorder. The I is the intervention. So it's kind of the what is it that we're doing that is going to kind of change things up a little bit. C is the comparison, and that's usually also the control. It means like the intervention is something that we did. We're going to leave a certain number of people exactly as they are so we can kind of compare those two groups. The outcome is obviously what we're going to be looking at and what we want to write up. And the T is silent because sometimes we measure these things across time. We're not going to have time to do that, obviously, because it's May is when this is due. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to look at studies that have already occurred. We're not going to launch into our own whole new study. So for the purposes of what we're doing here, our question in a PICO format can be about an intervention for which they need money, right? And we have to remember what we're actually doing this project for. Or we can look at it as a way of preventing something bad from happening. So we can kind of look at the history of different outcomes and say, if you do give money for this specific thing, you can prevent these things. So the first question, I tried to color code so that you can actually see the PICO right there. So among people living with cerebral palsy, that's your population, what's the effect of care provided by a licensed caregiver? So either an RN or an LVN on their health outcomes or ER visits, we can figure that out later, compared with care provided by unlicensed persons, which is often what's happening now. So that's kind of your control. So for this sort of a question, if we dig in, what we're going to find is that the research may or may not support that you need an RN or an LVN to provide the best care for somebody with cerebral palsy. But I'm going to tell you, if the RNs and LVNs do have better outcomes, they're going to cost more. And so if that's true, that's a very good reason why this foundation can take this data to the lawmakers and say, we need you to consider why it's worth increasing what our people make an hour, just because it's going to be better for the patient. On the other hand, as far as prevention goes, this says for the caregivers of people living with cerebral palsy, right? So this is not the people themselves, but the people who take care of them, usually parents by and large. Does the use of in-home care assistance, like a CNA or an LVN or an RN, reduce the risk of poor mental, physical health, and economic outcomes compared to those who do receive in-home care assistance? So we're not talking about poor mental and physical health and economic outcomes for the people with cerebral palsy. We're talking about what is the effect of not having enough funding to pay for somebody to be in the house to help you. As a caregiver, how does that affect you? And that is that little piece where we really wanted to put a face on the issue so that the lawmakers have something not too wonky, not too data-driven, but something real that they can kind of use to justify why they're going to allocate certain funding. So, because I think we might have given everybody enough time. Hi, everyone. So let's see. It's like 6:40, and some people have cameras off, no problem. I wanted to at least get that out there before we started kind of introducing ourselves and talked a little bit about the group and what we do, because like I said, we weren't sure how many people were going to be coming, and I wanted everybody to have a chance to show up. So welcome, Nicole and Alyssa, who've never worked with us before. I've done a few projects with Lizette, and we have some other students who worked with us before who also are probably going to be jumping in on this project. To just take a step back, though, what we do here is try to give anybody who's interested in research the opportunity to do some small piece. And we understand that you have very busy schedules. I know that your lives are packed, and that this is just one more thing. So as much or as little as you want to participate is totally fine. We don't do any gatekeeping whatsoever. You know, if you come to this meeting but you can't come to the next ones, that's totally fine. At the end of this, I've already gotten permission from the UCLA School of Nursing to enter our results at research days. So it will be like a recognized actual abstract that gets submitted. You'll have a publication credit for your CV or resume. And the whole goal is for you to be able to use this to get into whatever school it is you're trying to get into. So if you're just looking to get into an undergrad position, that's wonderful. I'm happy to help you after we do all of this and kind of individually talk about how you write this up in your essays for college. If you're looking to move to a master's position, because Lizette's somebody actually who started with us and then ended up applying and going back and doing an NP. And we did a lot of work with her essays and making sure that the applications were good and really reflected who she is and what she's capable of. So that's what we do here. And however much you want to do is fine. Today we're going to be just going over the lit review, and I'm going to show you how to look up articles. But at the end of this meeting, I will have a selection of articles and I'll email you one. And then you'll have a few weeks to just read it. And the next time we meet, you'll just kind of tell us what you thought. Nobody's expecting you to be perfect. And like I said, there's no wrong way to do it whatsoever, but you'll get to see how other people read articles. And hopefully that will help you kind of the next time you encounter something like this in your academic career, it won't be the first time you've seen it. So, okay. Before I go back to the bigger screen, or is that good?
No, that's good. That sounds like I could definitely fit that in my schedule, and I'm still interested in learning more.
I love it. Yeah, we try to be very no pressure because frankly, traditionally, the sciences have not been very diverse. And that means that there's a lot of gatekeeping. We try to not do any gatekeeping. Everybody's welcome. welcome. All right. So getting back to this thing. Okay. So now feel free to just speak up if you want to stop me, because I'm in a minute. But I wanted to kind of go through why we do lit searches in the first place, and kind of as researchers, how do we roll just in general? What is our life like? So like I said, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, I'm shrinking you down, so I won't be able to see you if you're just waving. But so basically the idea is you encounter some question in your life, or you see something on Facebook, or you see something in the news, and you're not really sure if it's true. And you want to get some information about something, but you want to make sure that it's not like, a Russian bot or somebody trying to manipulate you, or somebody who has some economic agenda behind what they're telling you. So a literature search really avoids articles and websites that have this implicit financial or philosophical bias behind their content. And so in a previous video, I looked at Cancer Treatment Centers of America and the LA Weekly, and they seem very different. Cancer Treatment Centers of America, great place. I don't have anything bad to say about them, but I will say that they have an agenda. So these are places that generally are away from the people that are in your normal network. They are a specialty hospital. There's different charges associated with that. They have kind of some concierge service. And so when you go to their website because you have questions, maybe if you have a cancer diagnosis, their content, while it may be true in some cases, it may also kind of try to skew you towards using their services, because hospitals are a business, and hospitals like this in particular are funded based on people thinking a certain thing about them. Now, that seems different than LA Weekly, who again, have an agenda. They're there to sell ads. So if you look at this cover page, 10 best sandwiches in Los Angeles, right? I'm not saying that news outlets are only there to sell ads. I expect that the LA Weekly has a basis of, solid journalism. I'm not going to say either way, but I am going to say that if you look at 10 best sandwiches in Los Angeles, those companies are going to be having more business, possibly because of this sort of an article. And I'm using air quotes. I'm not sure if you can see me on the camera. So if I have a real question, what am I supposed to do if I can't just go into, Yahoo or Google and just type something in? Then how am I supposed to know whether anything is real? And so what we do is, instead of going to kind of the name brand websites of whatever it is that we're looking for, a lot of times what you can do as a person, and what we always do as a scholar, is that we go to search engines that only have peer-reviewed articles. And that means that these things have been submitted for publication, and these different journals that are prestigious journals have a board of specialists in that particular topic. They've reviewed the article, they've vetted it, they decided that certain things needed to be changed or certain things weren't accurate enough. Those corrections were made, and then the articles were published. So you can feel really confident in the fact that what you're getting, a panel of experts has already decided is worthy of you reading, basically. So the way that we do it is a couple of different ways, and I'm going to kind of walk you through how to find some articles. But the idea is you can literally go into Google Scholar, which is like scholar.google.com. And what's also kind of nice is that when you pull up an article, you can select the formatting for your citation right there. So you don't have to try to figure out APA or MLA or whatever format you need. It's done for you. So that's super helpful. There are a couple search engines that we use specifically for health science. PubMed is a big one that generally people will include PubMed in their search about any health-related topic. And this accesses the Medline database. And so this is about life sciences and biomedical topics. And if you look, it's actually maintained by the National Institutes of Health, right? So you know that this is legit. You're not going to find something that's advertising some type of defibrillator, right? Because this is not about anybody having a vested interest. This is about real clean data. As nurses, we use CINAHL, and CINAHL is the Cumulative Index to Nursing and Allied Health Literature. The reason that we do, well, and this is articles about nursing, but also allied health and biomedicine and healthcare. So why would we use that if we could get that from PubMed? Just as a quick plug for nursing, nursing and medicine are different fields completely. And in a hospital, if you've been in a hospital, it can sometimes look like the physicians supervise the nurses, and the nurses are there to assist the physicians, but that's simply not true. To the kind of lay public, it can appear that way, partly because there's economic benefit of having nurses do certain tasks because they charge less an hour, basically. But technically, these are two separate fields. And nursing deals with the holistic person, which is like a multi-realm level of health. So they're mental health, physical health, spiritual health, sexual health, how they choose to die. All of those things are nursing, whereas medicine tends to be very disease process focused. So just a very different perspective. So it's good to get articles from a couple of different sources. So here I'm going to go step by step, and I know I'm moving quickly, but we're going to actually do a practice search, and I'm going to kind of show you how that goes. But in general, you go to, scholar.google.com, and you get this little window that pops up here that's really friendly. It says stand on the shoulders of giants, which I love that, because sometimes it feels like we're doing something very small. But you realize that it's all cumulative, like everything that we're doing kind of helps push us forward as a species. And I love that. So this particular slide was taken from a class that I was TAing in research methods for nurse practitioners, and they were looking to volunteer. So the topic I put in was nurse volunteers in homeless shelters. I just typed that right into that bar. And then the number or the articles that popped up included health needs of homeless clients accessing nursing care at a free clinic, and younger and older caregivers at homeless animal and human shelters, right? So lots of articles. And this is kind of the format that they pop up in. So there's a lot of flexibility within that. But it's very simple. It's literally 3 steps. And number 4 is just like, yay, you're all done. So that's very clean. In other shows that I have, other presentations that you can get off of our YouTube channel, Theory Generator Playground also, under Lit Review, they expand upon other search engines and other techniques like using EndNote, which is a program that will organize all of this for you. But this is basic. This is all you need to know. So now I figured we should try it and just kind of see what it feels like, because at the end of the day, I'm going to have a list of articles that I feel are like level appropriate. So I'm not going to give you some advanced like neurochemical study of anything if this isn't your field yet and you're just kind of easing into it. But I want you to kind of see where I'm getting these articles from, so that you may, if you have time, do one of these sample searches and maybe add some articles. We had a student, Julio, who was like famous for that. Whenever we gave him some assignments, he would go back and find other stuff that ended up being great. But so that's possible. So just to remind you, our questions are, the first one, among people living with cerebral palsy, what is the effect of care provided by licensed caregivers on health outcomes compared with care provided by unlicensed persons? That's literally about, does it matter if they have a license or not? The next question is, for the caregivers of these people, does in-home care assistance reduce the risk of bad things for them, poor mental and physical health, poor economic outcomes, compared to people who do actually get that help? Yeah, so it's kind of as simple as that. And now, let me see. I am going to show you a quick search. Okie dokie. So this is what the results from, I'm going to move it down a little bit, what the results from Google Scholar look like. So if I were to go backwards, down here. So when you first open Google Scholar, this is literally all that's there. And you can type in anything you want and trust that the articles are pretty good, have been vetted. I study a lot of Latinas. So when I start, so you see I start typing in Latinos or Latinas, my prior searches come up. So Synergy, mental and physical health, right? Or just plain mental and physical health, or providers working with Latinos, right? If you start typing up something that maybe you haven't searched before, but it has some ideas, it'll make some suggestions. Do you want to actually know a scale? Are you looking at depression and anxiety? You'll see that sometimes it talks about a specific population. The cleaner you can make your search, the better you're going to do as far as actually accessing articles. So let's just say we put in depression, right? I just want to point out the fact that 3.5 million articles just came up because I just typed in depression. So that's not tremendously helpful. We're not going to be reviewing 3.5 million articles, right? So you want to kind of ferret it down a little bit. So instead of just depression, and this is just an example, let's just say depression and anxiety in children. All right, still 2.4 million. That's kind of a lot. What if we say in teens? Oh, now we're down to 89,000, right? So again, we're not being super specific here, but there are ways to make our search be a little bit more helpful. And sometimes you get lucky, right? Like let's say I am looking for depression and anxiety in teens and I type that in, and even though there's 89,000 articles, the first thing that pops up is interesting to me. I want to know, how does their internet use affect their depression and anxiety? And coincidentally, that's actually a project that we're working on. And our last project was emotional well-being among teens, right? So that's an article that I'd want to read, but you may miss out on some kind of better articles or more current articles if you just kind of go straight through. So let's go back. This is what we had decided we were going to look at: family caregiving, cerebral palsy at home. And look at how many articles, only about 1,000. So that's hopeful, because that means that we won't have that many we need to scroll through. And you can see the ones that are purple are ones that I've already clicked on. But sometimes a low result can mean that it's an area of science where there just isn't very much. There just isn't a lot of literature. There isn't a lot of funding for explorations there. And that can be either because we've already solved that little t question, right? We actually know what's best. For now, right? But it could also mean that there are some biases about what type of science, especially in health, we think is important. So let's do this just for fun. So there's about 1,000 for family caregiving cerebral palsy at home. Let's put Asian right there. So there's only 400. So that's big, right? Let's do Hispanic. A little bit less. I think it's important to recognize that some of the topics that we look at have been underexplored as a general topic. But some topics are underexplored within certain populations who maybe experience things in a unique way because of social determinants of health, like their education, economic status, where they live, urban versus rural, whether or not it's an issue that's affecting kind of the dominant culture. And basically the idea behind doing any research is that you need to know what exists so that you discover where there's a gap in the knowledge. And where there's a gap in the knowledge is the ideal place for any of you to step in there. And in terms of you applying for a school, when you can establish that there's a valid gap in the knowledge and you've decided that you're going to be the one that fills that gap, that's how you get accepted and funded and supported. Because people who go in with intention, they don't represent as much of a risk or a threat. So if you're going into school and you're thinking about applying and you're like, I'm not really sure what I want to do, that's not necessarily somebody that we're going to funnel a bunch of resources to. even though maybe that's the person who needs the most. So it's good while you're doing these sorts of explorations with us, kind of ask yourself, like, what am I interested in? And is there something missing there that maybe I could add to the conversation? So being a researcher of color means that you can really critically add to the conversation in a way that other people can't. So, there's need. So if we take out the Asian keyword, those are called keywords, then we still have about 1,000, right? So what we can do then is over here on the left-hand side, we can create a cutoff. I don't want articles from 2004, right? In science, the traditional cutoff is 10 years. You don't want anything that's more than 10 years old because science moves very quickly. And 10 years ago was a different world, really. And so a lot of the factors that are affecting the results of those studies are not the same. Also, if it's something that hasn't been looked at in 10 years and revisited, it means it probably wasn't that valid or important, or it's been discredited, basically. So you have to watch out for that. The only time that more than 10 years is allowed is if it's like some larger conceptual theoretical philosophy paper about like what it means to, in this case, have cerebral palsy, right? So maybe there's this landmark study that everybody references. That's the kind of thing you do want to know about. But beyond that, let's cut it at 2015. And you can tell by this, by my search, that that's exactly what I did earlier, because I did this, kind of practiced it, because I knew I was going to be showing you guys live. And you'll immediately see that I found some articles that are in purple that I really liked. Now, the next thing to do, which I think is kind of important, is make it as easy on yourself as possible. Remember how I was telling you we stand on the shoulders of other researchers? So somebody may have already answered the questions that we've put forth. And if that's true, and the problem is that this foundation doesn't know that these answers already exist, and all I need to do is read an article and just update their paper that way, that saves me time and money and energy, and I have no problem with that. So one of the first things that I often do is look for other people's systematic reviews. They're called systematic reviews, meta-analysis, meta-synthesis. What it means is that somebody else already did this with our question, something close to the question that we came up with. And they have already collected all of this data, read all of these articles, and come up with some solid conclusions and findings. And that's something that we can look at. So this one right here, critical evaluation of the effectiveness of interventions for improving the well-being of caregivers of children with cerebral palsy, a systematic review. What this topic here, what the title kind of says to me, is that there's a problem with well-being among caregivers of children. So our second question, which was about if you're a caregiver, does it mess with you mentally, physically, financially, some other way? This article title in and of itself tells me, yes, it does. So when I go to read this article, I'm probably going to look at the abstract and see, does it kind of fit what I'm thinking about? And if it does, they don't have access to the whole thing right here, but I do. So this is the article itself. But I highlighted basically what we're looking for. So just to call your attention, caregiving for a child with CP is often associated with anxiety, stress, depression, low self-efficacy, financial burden, musculoskeletal pain, poor physical health, and a lower quality of life. So that paragraph in that one paper is everything that we're looking for. And the best part about it is that attached to each one of these sentences, there are citations. So if we care about whether or not it affects their, let's say, financial burden, we can now go and look up articles 15 and 16. Oops. Which you can tell I already did, because I'm kind of a nerd that way, and I didn't want to not know it was going to be here when I pulled it up. And articles 15 and 16 literally say prevalence of depression among family caregivers of children with intellectual disability. But here's the key: in a rural setting in Kenya. That's not maybe what we need for an exploration in California. It's good to know, but that might not be ideal. The next one is low back pain. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped one. Development and validation of an instrument to assess caregiver burden, which implies there is caregiver burden. And they created a scale. Okay, although if you look at this Ceylon, right, that's not an American journal, and that's fine. And it's not a European journal, which frankly, because we're very Eurocentric in America, tends to be like the most similar to what we have here. So while this is helpful for me, and it's good to know that there are articles that are looking at that, I'm probably going to go dig these articles up and read their references and see who they referenced until I can get it back to an article that is comfortable for me. So I feel like I understand the data. I'm able to get some information, and maybe we don't need to do some huge literature review. Maybe we just need to find a few articles that we all sit down with, kind of compare what the article said, and maybe it would be best for us to focus our attention on finding something that is more about people's experiences, right? So there's qualitative literature that literally tells the story of what is it like for these people. And at the end of the day, if what I do is give someone who's presenting to Congress a little blurb that says, I want to tell you about my friend Cindy. Cindy has a child living with CP, and Cindy also works full-time. And she used to have a caregiver that helped her for 20 hours a day or whatever, 20 hours a week. And because the funding got cut, Cindy now is working herself, you know, with 2 hours of sleep a day, and is exhausted and is wondering if she's going to make enough to get food on the table, right? That's sort of a story that comes from qualitative literature. Quantitative is the numbers. Qualitative is stories, people's voices, words. May be a better direction for us to go with this project, just based on what we've seen. So that is kind of the gist of the project. At this point, and I know I went very fast, that's why I tend to record these things, because I kind of think as I'm talking, and I like to just get this stuff out so we can talk about it. But basically, we always have to have in the back of our mind, like, what are we trying to achieve here? And I'm trying to get people who have kids with disabilities more money. And I'm also trying to be a good researcher, which means I can't pick and choose what I present. I have to look at all of the data. And unfortunately, if the data doesn't support that they need more money, then that's what I'm going to give them as my report. And that's kind of the difference between being a documentary filmmaker and a health sciences researcher. Because I want to portray stories and situations, but I don't want to fake the little T truths, you know? And so that's kind of where we are. So how are you guys doing? How did that feel? You good? Okay. So that's pretty much what I have to show you tonight. I can,
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
No, that's okay. Yeah, I just kind of wanted to know how that feels, if that's kind of in line with what you were thinking.
Yes, like reading the articles and then kind of just giving you my idea of how I felt about it at first, and then kind of going off from there, correct? And seeing
Yeah, and I actually, if this is your first time, I don't think you should read multiple articles. I think you should just read one article. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what our table of evidence looked like, which is what you're going to be responsible for creating. And so I'm sorry, I should have had it already prepped. Let me see. So we did this for our last project.
No, you're getting married too.
Okay, let's see. Okay. So now I'm going to share my screen real quick, and I'm going to show you what it looked like the last time we did this.
Okay, sounds good.
So this was a table of evidence that that we created last time, and I had DOC Lizette got assigned an article. Different people got assigned different articles. But basically the idea was I put the citation in there. I found the article, I put the citation in, and then I emailed it to the people who wanted to read it. And we'll go through a table of evidence. There's a whole separate training for that, just so that you feel really comfortable. This is super helpful as a tool to use later on in any of your classes that you need to kind of organize data. But you're going to read the article and talk about kind of what was the purpose of this article, and you know, who was involved, what was the sample and setting. In this case, I was looking for measures of emotional well-being, but in our case, we're probably going to look at what outcome was this talking about. Was it financial? Was it quality of life? What was that? What the results were. And then here in your discussion conclusion, that's where you get the chance to kind of tell us all, what did you think of this article? And I don't expect anybody to be ready to actually critique literature yet, because the general rule is that for every single study that exists, something is wrong. Because it's nearly impossible to do a perfect study, because we live in the real world. So you have financial and time and resource constraints. So you'll never design a perfect study. And eventually you'll get used to recognizing what's wrong, right? So like if I were to look at this one in particular, I would say of this population, 76% of the people that they interviewed were women. And that is going to mean that the results are skewed a certain way, especially because these were Latino elders, and Latino women tend to vastly outlive Latino men, which means that if you had Latino men who were 72 years, there's something about them that got them to that age, which makes them unique. So that's the kind of stuff that you'll kind of learn to pick up on and go, this may be something that I'm a little concerned about. Or maybe they'll use a term that they never define, which was the purpose behind this whole study. Was people kept talking about well-being, and I was like, what do you mean by well-being? Like, if there's no definition of well-being, then do you mean like, am I just like cool, or do you mean am I like a fully actualized person? Like, that matters. So anyway, so everybody will get assigned one article, or actually what I often do is if everybody's fairly evenly matched, then I'll just leave it open and I'll leave this part blank, and you can just go in and assign yourself an article. And then you read it, we set up a meeting, you try to fill this out. And again, I probably have some that are kind of wonky. They don't have to be perfect. You may read the article and go, this is the wrong thing for us to even look at. In which case, like, that's what happened here. We just, you know, highlighted it red and said like, yeah, don't even bother. That one's a waste of time. Or it's only talking about kids in Kenya, and that doesn't help us. So
yeah, it's not.
Yeah, so just being able to like rule out whether or not an article is worth our time is helpful to us. I'd like to come up with no more than 12 articles that we do to be able to present a case, because I think at this point there's about 6 people working on this project, and I don't want to have to do more than 6 all by myself, and I don't like anybody to do more than 1 unless they really want to, because I know you guys have lives and you're busy and, you know, you're doing all sorts of things. And there's no way to do it wrong, because I'm reading all the articles anyway. So if you have an article and you feel like you may have missed something critical, or you have a question, it's not a problem. I will have read it and we can go over it if you want, or you can just tap out and be like, this is too hard. I'm not I'm not interested in doing this. So, so that's fine. Once we did that, probably create some sort of chart like I did here. And then we'll do a real basic write-up. So this led to a poster and a paper that we're kind of shopping around at journals. And this is the citation that we used, right? So you see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people who helped. You'll notice that Zoe is my daughter. You guys probably know her. Haley's another girl who goes to a private school, who's also at the time, she was 14. Hovita is a PhD student. Lizette's getting her NP, nurse practitioner. Jackie is a master's of social worker student. So we have people from all over, like all walks of life, who do this kind of stuff. And at the end of the day, oh, sorry. Zoe's here, honey. At the end of the day, you will be able to say that you created something like this. In our case, the title was Definitions and Measures of Emotional Well-Being Used in Studies Among Aging Latinos, a literature review. Yours is going to say something like Caregiver Burden Alleviated by In-Home Assistance, a literature review. And then later on, when you talk to somebody about the project, you'll be able to say why you looked at that, what it makes you think about your possible future. Like if you want to be a nurse, why did this help you want to be a nurse? Or if you want to go to medical school, why it helped you go to medical school, or whatever it is. You'll kind of have your own personal spin on the project. And again, that's something we can talk about so that when it's time for you to write it up, you don't say like, yeah, I just, I volunteered and I kind of wanted to do this or that. But you'll be able to really confidently say, like, this was my contribution so far to science, and this is what I want to do with it next. So, all right. So we have 15 minutes left. Any other questions about what's going to happen next, or concerns, or just anything?
So you'll give us the title of the article that we have to read, correct? And we input it into this graph that looks like this, or we get training on it too?
So you're going to get training next on how to do the table of evidence and kind of why we do it. But I am going to look for an article, and I will send you it'll be like a PDF of the article itself so that you don't have to look it up. Because not everybody's schools support access to these journals. It's usually kind of expensive to be able to read them.
Yes, I do.
Which is silly. I know, it's crazy, but I'll make sure that you get a free copy, so at least you have that to review. And then at that point, at any time, if you want to, if you need to call me or you need to talk about stuff, we can. But I usually like to give a week or two for people to look at their article. And then that's basically it. So probably in the either next week or the week after is when we'll do the next meeting and when you'll get your article sent to you. And then from then on, you'll have a week or two to look at it. And then that's basically it. And I will do the majority, like 99% of all of the synthesis and writing up. I'm going to be doing that because it's a lot to ask of you guys. But we will come out with some product, and that product will be presented at a conference in May. So it will either be at the UCLA Conference on Aging, or it'll be at the School of Nursing Research Days. You are more than welcome to come to campus and present our poster. You'll meet a ton of faculty and other researchers. Last year, we had 2 of our girls who came and presented, got job offers to work in people's labs. Yeah, so it was really fantastic. And because what we're doing is so unique. Nobody is doing this. I don't know why, because I think it's a great way to expose people to research. And people always need, smart young people who are new to learn how to do some interesting thing in their lab and help them with some very small piece that's actually kind of important. So that will be in May. And you go to the conference, that's great. It's a whole day. We go there, we get coffee, and then we all go in, and they usually have speakers, and we listen to the speakers, and then you can go talk to them afterwards. they set up all the different posters, and people walk around and look at each other's posters, and you'll take turns standing in front of the poster and kind of explaining what we did and what we found, which is good practice to just kind of be able to do public speaking. And we take a ton of pictures, and we, you know, blast it all over social media. And then, like I said, I definitely introduce you to faculty at the School of Nursing, and School of Medicine is usually there too. And it's just a good way. You should have business cards on you, by the way. It's a good way to make some quick connections for when you do need recommendation letters, or you are looking for some other, like, you know, positions. So.
Okay.
All right.
That sounds good.
Yay. Yeah, it's literally zero pressure. I really just want you to be able to, like, you know, do whatever on here that you want, be able to go to this conference and feel like you're part of the academic community, which is so fascinating. I mean, scientists are like a worldwide community. The world is so small for us because we collaborate all over the country with people from, like I said, from different countries. And it's a great life, you guys. I have a really good life. I get to do interesting things that are important and help people. Yeah, so I highly recommend it. I always think people should check it out. If they don't have a parent in research, you would never know that all this stuff is happening. Yeah, so. Okie dokie. Well, I am going to stop the recording in a second unless you have any other questions. And then otherwise, I will be in contact.
Okay, yes, that sounds good.
Okay. The only other thing I'm going to say is that I post a lot of scholarship stuff on the Facebook page, which is at TG Playground. You don't have to apply for them yet unless you are in a place where you feel like you need to apply for them. Alyssa, what year are you?
I'm a junior currently.
So you got to apply for them. But I will help you if you need help writing essays. I got a lot of scholarships when I was undergrad. And I get a reasonable amount now as a PhD student, but it's because there's formulas you can use for how to answer their questions. And once you write 3 to 5 essays answering them, you can just recycle them, like adjust them. So instead of applying for 1 or 2, you're applying for like 15, you know? So any little bit counts, frankly. $500 bucks, $500, you know? So. Okay, cool. So then we'll talk about scholarship stuff. Let me know if you see anything on my page or anywhere that you're interested in. And certainly if you need a letter, I'm always happy to write recommendation letters. That's fine too. So no problem.
Thank you so much.
No, my pleasure. Thank you for signing in. And yeah, I will be in touch. Everybody have a great night. Be safe.
Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.